Hi, my name's Ian, and this is why I'm on Instagram and YouTube. July 23rd, 2020, I was involved inside a motorcycle accident. That accident changed my life forever. That morning, I woke up, completely normal day, showered, got ready for the day, and I got breakfast, and I decided I was going to take my Harley to work that day. That Harley was a 2014 Sportster 1200. It was a stunt bike that I had worked on. I had spent a lot of money on, not only performance upgrades, but also in not only in performance upgrades, but also in paint and everything that I could basically throw at it. That day before I left my house, I kept having this voice in my head tell me, take the truck, take the truck. Because at that time, I was driving a I was driving an old school truck at that time. And in my head I just kept saying, no, it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I remember so vividly that when I got on that Harley that day, I remember I even prayed. I did sign the cross. I prayed. I'm like, am I feeling this? Like, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Like, I'll be okay. And I went on. And at first, it went on smoothly, just like any other day. I was excited because not only was I going to just take my Harley to work to do some pinstripes, but also paint my helmet. At that time, I was a paint and auto body mechanic. So I would do anything from fixing dents to painting to anything really that has to do with paint or metal. But what's funny is that saying's true. You'll get in an accident less than 3 miles from your house. And everyone thinks, oh, that's not true. It was true. In Riverside on the street of Streeter, and I couldn't tell you the cross street, I was on my Harley keeping up with the pace of traffic, and a man on the opposite side of the road decided to make a left on a red light. And at that time, we were heading down, our light was green. I was going about 25 miles per hour, not very fast for the street. It sounded loud. That's because, of course, it's a Harley. It's always going to sound loud. But as I was going straight, he made a left, and I swerved to the left to try to avoid him, but ultimately, we ended up colliding. And when I swerved left, my right foot and the rear of the bike hit his rear bumper, and everything changed. I remember swerving, hitting, and then it went blink. And it's like cutscenes from a movie where it goes in and it goes out. I remember tumbling. I remember hitting something hard. I remember sliding. While I was sliding, all I could think of was, this hurts, something's not right. This hurts, something's not right. And after I was done sliding, I remember I looked down, and that was the most traumatizing moment of my life. I was where I was after the accident. My foot was over there. So my foot was severed and somewhere else. And from what I understand, when I hit the back of the guy's car, my foot hit so hard too that his rear crash bar basically ripped at my flesh, my tendons, my nerves, and my bone and left it hanging. And while I was going down with the bike and sliding, because we slid over 250 feet after the impact of the car. Looking at my foot, something like that definitely changes a person. Because you realize, God giveth, God taketh. And I tell everyone this because it was true. At that time, I was very, very prideful and very stubborn. I thought I was the shit. And I was making a lot of money at that time. I didn't care. I was really fit. I was doing everything that I wanted to do without remorse or even thinking about it twice. And I'll admit, I strayed away from God. I kept him in my corner, but I was like, he wasn't my sole purpose or focus. And I regret that. But also with this experience, I'm thankful for it because it taught me a lot. Keep in mind, this was in 2020, like beginning of the pandemic. So after all that happened, I remember the ambulance coming And all I could think of was, this is it. My life's going to change forever. I'm going to be in a wheelchair, in crutches, the cane for the rest of my life. All at the age of 20. And when you experience something like that at such a young age, it does something to you that money can't buy, that you can't talk about or even explain until you've been there. I remember the paramedics coming and the fire people. This is the fire paramedics. I remember seeing them pick up my foot and I could feel it. I could feel them grabbing my foot, but it wasn't connected. And they brought it to me and they put it on some cardboard thing. And I remember just the faces of them. What I also remember were cars that started to drive by after everything happened. There were bike parts everywhere. There was blood on the ground. It was a mess. I remember being loaded into the ambulance with a firefighter and telling him I don't want to lose my foot. I don't want to lose my foot. I have so much to do. I don't want to lose my foot. And to this day, I wish I could know who it was. But he told me, don't worry. You're going to be all right. Just breathe. And just that phrase, just breathe, has taught me so much in life. I remember going to the hospital, and that ride to the hospital was one of the longest rides in my life. It felt like years. It literally, it felt like an eternity. Because all I could think was my life is forever changed. And I remember going to the hospital, and I remember getting wheeled out, and the first thing that happened as soon as I entered the hospital was everyone was looking at me and with just a face of shock and horror. I was scared. I was absolutely terrified. I was afraid. I remember telling him, "Don't amputate. I want my foot. Don't amputate. I want my foot." At that time, a doctor came in, looked at me, and said, "You're gonna be all right. Just breathe. You're gonna be all right." And I remember a policewoman, blonde policewoman, came in. She was trying to get a statement after everything happened, and it's like that's not the best time. But I remember they asked for someone to call. I gave them that info, and I remember them just being like, "You're okay." The thing I remember most about that part was the medical interns, the look on their faces. I still see vividly to this day because it's like those faces will never leave my mind because I know exactly what they were thinking. But they put me to sleep, and when I came to, my mom was there, and I remember at that time just thinking that I let my parents down because I had promised them that I wouldn't get in any accidents. I'd be the safest driver. And I remember when I first saw her, I was just like, "Mom, like, I'm sorry. Mom, I'm sorry." And she was crying, of course, but she was just like, "I told you, Mijo, I told you why'd you get that damn bike, why'd you get that damn bike?" And all I could just tell her was, "Sorry. I'm sorry, Mom, I'm sorry." That's the point that things just kind of went downhill from there. When I woke up, my foot was connected by rods, and I was in so much pain. I spent 4 months in the hospital, and it was peak COVID time. No visitors, no visitors, nothing. Everything was on tight lockdown. And at that point, I think God really separated me from everyone and everything because I had maybe one visitor per week. I was only allowed one visitation per week, sometimes up to 3. And I remember feeling so alone and so miserable. Not only because of the accident, but just realizing who I was at that time. It could change you. It does change you. I remember the doctor said, we want to amputate your foot, let it grow for 2 years, and then reattach it. And all I could think was, that's the stupidest idea. But I was like, no, we're not going to do that. Eventually, I was transferred to Loma Linda Hospital. And I can't tell you how thankful I was for the transfer. And I had a great doctor there by the name of Dr. Johnson. And I told him, I want to keep my foot. I don't care what procedures you have to do, but I want to keep my foot. I want to be able to use it. I don't want to be an amputee. And there's nothing against amputees at all, or people who have experienced anything like that, or have lost limbs. I respect you to the highest amount. Matter of fact, I credit you. I had 15 surgeries in total. And I think that's counting some debridements. But one of the surgeries was when they took a skin graft from my thigh, from my right thigh, the same leg that it happened on. And I always joke around with this, but I always say that they made me slim thick. And yeah, but they cut a 4-inch by 13-inch section from my thigh of skin and muscle. They put it down on my lower leg where I was missing skin, nerves, muscle, and a lot of tissue. Go figure, from the ripping and the accident. And that was the first one. And I had to be kept in a very hot room for 2 days. And it was just so that the skin graft could survive. And those 2 days were the most grueling days. It was so hot, and it was midsummer, mid-COVID. I wasn't allowed to have ice packs. I wasn't allowed to have any visitors, not even cold water, because they were not even cold water because they were afraid that I would put it on there. And just being so miserable. And I had God bless her soul, but I had the most stubborn and uneducated nurse at that time. And after those 2 days, I had a couple more debridements. And then the next surgery was a rod surgery, and I got a titanium rod put from my knee cap all the way down to my ankle. I remember waking up from that surgery so vividly because I woke up screaming. I literally woke up screaming because I was in so much pain. And being with the injuries that I had, the male nurses, and I mean a good amount, hefty dudes, had to hold me down, and they could barely hold me down. I remember that specifically because I was fighting and screaming, and I was in tears because that pain was nerve, tendons, muscle, skin. That gave me a bunch of opioids, from Dilaudid to fentanyl, and it wasn't even doing it. Nothing. And it got to the point where they actually had to max dose me with fentanyl and Dilaudid, and it still wouldn't even subdue the pain because I just had a rod. If you're wondering how they put the rod in, just YouTube it. They literally smack that shit in with a hammer, and they're not nice with it either. But I remember that, and then I remember they called my mom to be like, hey, he's at the max limit, what do we do? And she said, call the doctor. And I remember the doctor was just like, give him whatever he needs to put him to sleep. Not euthanize, but just put him under, or else he's going to go into shock or whatever. I remember they put me under because I went out at that time, they just wanted to give me pills. I said, no, I don't want to go on any opioids. I don't want to go on anything. And I remember there was a doctor there at that time. He said, hey, I know you don't want to go on it. And I told him the reasons, because people my age, and they're just, I don't want to get on that shit. And I remember he told me, hey, it's okay. It's okay to go on it because it's okay to go on it because of your situation. It makes complete sense. Dude, you have nerve, bone, muscle, skin, and just about everything on the chart. just hurting and damage. No one's going to judge you, and we all completely understand. We're doctors, we understand. And I remember being like, okay, just something on the smallest strip possible, because I don't want to do it. And I thank God, because when he did, it's just like life got a little better. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this was that while I went to every surgery, or the day before, or while I was going to the surgery, I didn't care if I woke up or not. I just wanted the pain to stop, and to me, life was shit. Life was miserable, and I didn't want to be there anymore. What changed that was a couple things, but one of them was I have to be there for family. Not only for family, but for myself. How can I take care of them if I can't take care of myself? And I think that's what hit hard too. Not being able to pay back my mom or my dad for everything that they've given me, and to show others that you can get better. You can move on from this. And God bless my brother, but I remember, without me knowing, he reached out to a bunch of people that I liked, like YouTubers and musical artists. And I remember my brother reached out. At that time, me and my brother were really into horror stories or any type of like cryptid stories. And my brother reached out to a YouTuber by the name of John Ballin. And of course, he didn't think he'd respond. But I remember one day waking up in the hospital and just being so miserable. I contemplated a lot of dumb stuff that I shouldn't have. But I remember I got a notification on my phone. I looked down and I clicked it open. And my mind just thought, I was like, huh? When I looked at the notification, it said message from Mr. Ballin. And I was like, huh? He said, get well soon, brother. And something like that coming from someone so influential, who I even looked up to, even when I was like training to go into the Navy, which I never did, getting a message from someone like that I looked up to definitely changed my outlook on life, and especially recovery. John, if you ever watch this, thank you. And I sincerely mean that. Thank you. And another time, I just got back from another surgery, and I was just miserable. I was in so much pain. And I remember I also got another notification. And when I opened it, I was like, there's no way. There's no way. There is no fucking way. Taking into account, I had been listening to this guy for years. I mean, absolutely years before he was on shows. The name that I saw on the phone was the White Buffalo. The White Buffalo is a folk type band that is an amazing band that you guys should check out. I think when I looked at that message too, I got really emotional, because it's like, wow, it definitely helped me. It definitely helped me want to live. Someone who I looked up to, who I thought was the coolest guy in music and just absolutely the coolest dude, reached out to me in such a hardship time, and didn't just send me a message, sent me a fucking video that to this day I will always cherish. And Jake, if you're ever watching this, thank you. And I hope you enjoy the gift bag that I dropped off at one of your concerts with your manager.
I hope you have a speedy recovery and everything works out great. And thank your brother. He's persistent. But yeah.
Jacob, my brother, I love you. Thank you. But nonetheless, even after I got those messages, life looked a little brighter. And the pain didn't hurt as much. And the days weren't so long anymore. I had another surgery, and it was a bone graft surgery. And they drilled from my kneecap all the way to the end of my femur a hole as thick as your thumb. And they pulled out bone marrow, and they put it in the place that I was missing bone. Because yes, I was missing about 8 inches of bone. And after that, when I was in the hospital, I started making friends with the nurses and the main nurse on charge, like the main nurse like the main nurse that was in charge of all the other nurses. And life got a little bit better. My mom would at La Melinda, we were allowed a couple more visitors and more visit times. And my mom would bring me snacks or things like that. And actually, I looked forward to the next day. I looked forward to life. When they sent me home, I didn't want to take any medication home because of how risky it was. So I remember I went home completely cold turkey, no meds, no nothing, and I had a withdrawal. Keep in mind, at that time, I was on a shit ton of Dilaudid. I was on a shit ton of fentanyl, and it was also for the pain. And I remember every time they would administer it to me, I'd tell them, "Can you do less of a dosage? Can you do less of a dosage?" Um, but yeah. And then I remember that withdrawal was horrible. I spent 2021 and half of 2022 in crutches in a wheelchair. Yeah. That's the third time I had to learn to walk in my life. It's a whole different story. But I remember I would go to the gym and just try to do upper body. And I remember going to the gym in my crutches. And I remember my mom being so stubborn. "No, don't, because what if your foot? I was like, "Mom, I need to get out of the house." I remember going to the gym. I remember being at Planet Fitness with crutches, with a broken leg that was still healing, and getting at it. And I would just do upper body. My left foot, I didn't touch my right foot at all. But I remember going constantly because I wanted to stay in shape. I wanted to stay fit. And eventually, when I could start putting pressure and walk on my right foot, I started doing more things like just little things like walking, a light treadmill or anything like that. And then from there, I did smaller things like squats, things like that. And then eventually, when my leg got stronger, I started doing things like the bike, but I was very slow with it, and like leg machines and things like that. But I was very slow. I basically I did that as my physical therapy. And from the accident, I got a condition called drop foot. It's where I can't lift up my foot and it always just drops. If you ever see me out in public, you'll notice I have a certain gait to me. That's it. But yeah. But I didn't let it stop me. Even with drop foot, I started to deadlift, do squats, and things like that. And I got better and better. Of course, you heard a little clop whenever I'd walk around, even to this day. But I'm starting to cure it and fix it. And I will eventually. Within the next 2 years, hopefully. I went from being at the lowest point of my life to just recently deadlifting 375 pounds. And that accomplishment means the world to me because it means a lot. It means I went from being like, I'm going to be an amputee. I'm going to be in crutches or a wheelchair for the rest of my life, to deadlifting 350 or 360 at the bar. And not only that, but also I became closer with God. Definitely became a lot closer because I realized that you take a lot of things for granted, whether it be your family, friends, materialistic things you have, even life. People think that they're going to wake up every day. Some people don't. People can walk normally. People take the smallest stuff for granted, but everything's a blessing. And if your loved ones are still alive, tell them you love them. Spend as much time with them as you can. And never let them go. And always smile. Because you never know when your life will change. And it can happen in an instant. Heck, it happened to me. But that's why I started this channel, to kind of show you that even with hardships in life, or even anything that can happen, I have a business. It's a smaller grooming business. I make hair products like pomades, shampoos, things like that. And it's Western based, because I've always kind of been in like the whole kind of country Western stuff. And I apply that to it, and it's pretty cool. But going forward, I will post videos about working out, about working on things like motorcycles, trucks, anything really. Things that I like to do. And if you guys watch, cool. If you guys don't, then I hope you're well.